Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Behind the Canvas with Peter Waddell tonight. Before we get started, I would like to take a few minutes for some housekeeping guidelines. Please remember to mute yourself, and if you have a question for Peter, please put it in the chat and I will ask it for you around 7 p.m. I would also like to take a second and welcome Tudor Place's Board of Trustees members who are joining us this evening, Val Hawkins and Melissa Kakeshian. Now, I would like to introduce you to our very special guest, Peter Waddell, the Artist-in-Residence at Tudor Place. Hailing from New Zealand, Peter is best known for his paintings of Washington, D.C. history and architecture. He has created numerous works about the Capitol in the 19th century and numerous commissions for the historic sites, including Mount Vernon, our home Tudor Place, the Clara Barton Missing Soldiers Office Museum, and the White House Historical Association. In 2010, he received the Mayor's Coveted Art Award. Please join me in welcoming him tonight.
In honor of President's Day and George Washington's birthday, I'm going to talk about presidents, first ladies, and the White House using my paintings. George Washington never lived in the White House, though he chose the site and lived long enough to see it in construction. He had three great works: getting rid of the British, the founding documents, and the city that bore his name. I take the view that no George Washington, no United States. He was the indispensable man. He was also a man of considerable style, even when camping in the Revolutionary War. Here is his beautiful campaign tent, actually an exact replica erected at Tudor Place. Like much else about the founders, it looks back to antiquity in form and decoration, as does the White House itself. We've got another shot of the tent. Here it is at night. Each president and first lady created a stage set to convey their message about their presidency. Next one, we have Jefferson. Jefferson presented himself as a gentleman farmer, scholar, scientist, a man of simple yet refined tastes. He turned the levee room, now the state dining room, into his office. He received the British envoy in slippers, to the envoy's shock. He really was not interested in ceremony at all. On the other hand, James and Dolly Madison, our next slide, most definitely were. White House interiors tend to be short-lived. The objects in the White House don't usually belong to the president. They're gathered together into a setting for the president. This is Dolly Madison's principal drawing room, now the Blue Room. Burned by the British in 1814, it exists only in contemporary descriptions and my painting. Here she created a forum that would draw together the two political parties in the crisis of the War of 1812. The room was the height of fashion, decorated by Henry Latrobe and curtain maker Mary Sweeney. But much of the credit belongs to Mrs. Madison. My painting shows a party Washington Irving attended January 13, 1811. If we go, there's a close-up, and that on the left in the green jacket, the gentleman with his back towards us, is Washington Irving. Everyone in this painting is someone who attended Dolly Madison's soirees at the White House. He described one of them. I left the darkness and dirt of Washington's streets and entered the blazing splendor of Mrs. Madison's drawing room. Here I was graciously received and found a collection of great and little men, and within 10 minutes was hand in glove with half the assemblage. Mrs. Madison is a fine, portly, buxom dame who has a pleasant smile and a word for everyone. Now we'll go on to Andrew Jackson. This is the East Room in 1837. Jefferson didn't like state ceremony, and the East Room was not used, and it was still unfinished when Jackson was elected. Congress made money available in 1828, and it was completed in 1829. The first White House room to be decorated entirely with items purchased from a store and not commissioned. His stage was designed to dazzle, with its yellow wallpaper and blue and gold curtains. Played in by the Marine Band, the greatest military hero since Washington would appear beneath a halo of gold stars and sun rays, wearing a blue cape, and that's the door he entered in on the left there. This is the day that the 1,000-pound cheese he'd been given was finally eaten in record time. There's a close-up of my neighbor girls who modeled for this painting, eating cheese. They're now all graduated college. We'll go on to President Hayes and Mrs. Hayes. As well as a stage for the president, there is also a backstage for the president. Here is Lucy Hayes and her maid, Winnie Munro, and her Siamese cat, the first in America in 1879. This painting was in the Washington Post recently with a story about cats in the White House when the Bidens got a cat. The piece said that this cat's name was Siam, but in fact it was Miss Pussy. They are in the family's private rooms. It gives a good idea of what an eclectic mix the White House was in the 19th century. On the left is the Lincoln bed. We're in the president's bedroom. There are vestiges of the previous decor. Carpets were changed constantly. And through the door into Mrs. Hayes' bedroom, you can see a new modern set of faux bamboo furniture that she bought. The Hayes presented themselves as the model American family. They were teetotalers. People used to say the water flowed like wine. We'll go on to Chester Arthur now. Chester Arthur was a wealthy New Yorker who was appalled at the dowdy, worn public rooms in the White House. He had his friend Louis Comfort Tiffany decorate the public rooms and create a stage of glamour, good taste, and urbanity. For a brief moment, the White House was at the nexus of fashion. These interiors did not last long. They were very fragile, relying on paint effects for much of the glamour of them. The furniture in this room is by Herter. If we go to the blue room in the Cleveland administration, also directed by Tiffany, it's a sort of a frosty, dreamlike space. Frances Cleveland, the child bride of the president, is there. These interiors really only lasted a few years. The gas had been put into the White House, but there were no, it was just the jets burning, just gas burning in the jet. There was no glass or anything over it. And then through the doors, they're called jibney doors. On the right, you can see the south portico. The Tiffany screen was the major thing that the White House gathered from the Chester Arthur administration. This extended across the entrance hall, dividing the cross hall from the front door, which faced north. Every time the front door opened, there was a howling draft in the public rooms. The screen lasted a bit longer than the rest of the decorating by Tiffany. It was removed in the 1902 renovation and is lost. It's shown on the day in 1891 when electricity was first installed by White House electrician Irwin Hoover, a sign of modernity. He wrote a reminiscence about all this. Unfortunately, the president and first lady were afraid they would be electrocuted and called the servants to turn the lights on and off. If we go to the next one, we're with President Theodore and Edith Roosevelt. Once again, this is a watercolor, which is why the paint looks thin. It is thin. This is a watercolor for a painting that we're going to see. Once again, the White House was in desperate need of repair, and President Roosevelt needed settings for the imperial presidency, reflecting the United States' new position in the world. In those days, presidents were free to impose their own style on the House. After them, it was the House that imposed presidential style on the presidents. It was the architectural firm, McKim, Mead and White, did the job. The style is both colonial and neoclassical. We go to the next one. The painting shows the finishing touches being put on the state dining room. Mrs. Roosevelt set an example for all future first ladies by essentially becoming the contractor, supervising every aspect of the project. The room was decorated with hunting trophies, surprisingly not shot by the president, but bought from a New York supplier. In my painting, we see the first indoor dog at the White House. He slept with Ted. Blackjack. He was, by all accounts, an outstanding dog. The president wrote, human in intelligence and affection, he learned all kinds of tricks, was a high-bred gentleman and never brawled. He was buried on the grounds. When Mrs. Roosevelt moved out, she could not bear to leave him under the eyes of presidents who might not care for a little black dog, and had him exhumed and taken to the family home. If we go on to Grace Coolidge, the Roosevelts left behind some serious structural problems. This is 1927 we're at now. And the roof and attics had become unsafe. Mrs. Coolidge created a third floor from the attics, including 14 rooms for the president's family. It was her idea to create what was called the sky parlor on the roof, above the south portico. It's today known as the solarium. The White House was run by the Army Corps of Engineers in those days, headed by Ulysses S. Grant, son of the president. And he's in the uniform there on the left, Mrs. Coolidge and the architects. They took the whole roof off the house and then built another temporary roof, which you can see it's like looking inside a boat at the top of the painting there. And then they built a new roof underneath the temporary roof. So it was really, the White House has had a lot of work done to it over the years, as you'll find out. Now, if we move on to President and Mrs. Kennedy. Now, this is not the White House, this room. Mrs. Kennedy's friend, Jane Wrightsman, who fabulously rich and extremely generous woman who gave the American wing to the Metropolitan Museum in New York, introduced Mrs. Kennedy to Stéphane Boudon, who worked for the French decorating firm Janssen. While she was in France in June 1961, Mrs. Kennedy asked the French culture minister, André Malraux, to take her to visit Napoleon's Chateau de Malmaison. My painting shows Mrs. Kennedy in Empress Josephine's silk-draped bedchamber, recently restored by Boudon. Mrs. Kennedy is wearing a suit by Chaise Ninon, a Halston beret, and a diamond and ruby Tiffany brooch given to her by the president. Malmaison had a powerful effect on the First Lady, and I believe inspired many of her choices in the major rehab she gave the White House. Instead of being the comfortable yet formal family home of the Trumans and the Eisenhowers, furnished with high-quality contemporary furniture, she saw it as a museum showing the finest in furniture and decorative arts. A law was passed that things could no longer be removed from the White House or sold. Mrs. Kennedy was following an interest in the history of the house many 20th century First Ladies had nurtured. She was not the first who tried to find and return historical pieces to the house, but she did not try and recreate an exact replica of any original interior. All the First Ladies since Mrs. Kennedy have worked within the parameters that she created. By 1969, the Kennedy restoration was getting worn. We can go to the next slide, actually. It's Mrs. Nixon, Tonga, and architect Richard Basin Jones. Mrs. Nixon got to work. She was interested in getting closer to the American historical examples and without the Frenchiness of the Kennedy restoration. She visited local homes with period original plaster ceiling. She also collected furniture original to the home. Now we'll have President George W. and Laura Bush. Like most modern First Ladies, the Bushes brought nothing with them and chose their furnishings from a huge warehouse that now holds everything belonging to the White House. Mrs. Bush redecorated bedrooms and the green room, but most notably the Lincoln bedroom. This is not where Lincoln actually slept, it's the office, or it was his office. Mrs. Bush made a terrific job, having minutely recreated pelmets, carpet, and wall covering to create a fresh yet historical room for important guests. Now we have Mrs. Obama in the family dining room. Mrs. Obama bought an original contemporary take on the family dining room, used mostly for small official meals. With decorator Michael Smith, she cleverly combined federal furniture with abstract art. In my painting, the room is in its final stages. The portrait of Edith Roosevelt, which previously hung there, is being moved out, and a modernist painting by Robert Rauschenberg is hung. And we'll go on to Mrs. Reagan. While recuperating in the solarium after being shot, President Reagan told Michael Deaver that he'd always dreamed of living in a house with high ceilings, white walls, and rooms opening off a giant hall. The spaces were used for entertaining. If we can just go to the next shot. The space, that was the watercolor for this painting, the previous one. The spaces were used for entertaining, as at Versailles. The more important you were, the closer you got to the private quarters. The previous shot was Mrs. Reagan with Elizabeth Taylor, a personal friend. But I felt when I came to do the painting that somehow made Mrs. Reagan seem like a light figure. And in fact, she was very important and had a considerable effect on policy, especially stopping nuclear proliferation. And I chose in the end to have her in conversation with Mrs. Gorbachev, which she did have in this room. So it's historically accurate. If we get we've got a close-up there of the two of them together. That's the old executive office building. So that's the west end of the White House. And you can see that window from the outside. But we don't get to see it from the inside on the regular tour anyway. The Reagans had a deep respect for tradition, but never at the expense of practicality and comfort. Mrs. Reagan had a profound influence on the president's guest house, Blair House, on the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue. Just supposedly after being host to Winston Churchill at the White House and finding him wandering the halls at all hours, some say nude. Blair House was owned by the Blair family since 1836, up until it was bought by the government, and was an important part of political events in Washington and continues to be. I had been commissioned to paint a number of works about the house, which now comprises 4 houses and a total of 112 rooms. After World War II, there were many attempts to completely redo Lafayette Square with modernist buildings. Mrs. Kennedy was the one who saved the historic nature of the square, including Blair House. I think we can get a little closer with the next painting. By 1982, Blair House was getting run down and the whole thing required a total rehab. It's one more, I think there's another painting that's several paintings of the front. New York designers Mark Hampton and Mario Boata were commissioned to redo the house, creating interiors of both dignity and luxury, and best of all to me, color. Interior decorating has become very neutral and low-key in recent years. This is the Dillon Room, designed by Mario Boata, using the most wonderful handmade 18th century Chinese wallpaper. It's an exquisite room. We've got a close-up of the wallpaper that I did in a tiny painting, a study for that other one. The next painting is the Truman Study. This was used by President Truman while he lived in the house during a rehab of the White House. The mantle came from Mrs. Roosevelt's bedroom. So things get used a lot, get moved around a lot. Let's go on to the next. They're beautiful rooms. They're just beautiful. This is a watercolor sketch of the Lincoln sitting room from the front hall for a painting I was doing of which we'll see in a moment. This part of the house, the Lincoln sitting room and the entrance hall of Blair House, and one more room here, which we'll see, were all designed by Mark Hampton. He was a terrific designer, perhaps more to contemporary taste than Mario Boata. Decorating now has to be gender neutral too. That's another reason that things have been changed a bit at Blair House. And the next, here we've got inside the Lincoln sitting room. This was where Lee was offered command of the Union forces just before the Civil War. And it's the closest, there are a lot of wonderful and fascinating original Brady photographs. There's all sorts of things in there that are really museum items. I mean, terrific items. But it doesn't come across as a museum, and it's extremely comfortable. Like every piece of furniture in Blair House, and a lot of it is antique and seriously old, but every piece is really comfortable. And all the lamps are exactly where you need a lamp. It's perhaps my closest rub with really high-class decorating. Now the next one is my last slide. Oh no, that's similar to the previous painting, but not quite the same. The quick-eyed among you will spot the difference. And now my last. This is the front sitting room in Blair House. The houses have different names. This is just the one White House that was the first Blair House. The next one was the Lee Blair House next door. But anyway, and this is one of my favorite rooms. I just love the pink. And I like the enfilade of one room opening off another room. It's my last slide. I feel we can't underestimate the influence of First Ladies in rethinking and redesigning the White House.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Peter, for leading us in the discussion. We do have a couple questions this evening we'd love to ask you. The first one is, could you tell us, is the picture behind you finished?
Oh, yes. Those of you who saw my last talk might remember this. Yes, it is finally, after a year and I don't know how many months, it is complete. And it will be going off to Paterson, New Jersey, to the new national park, which is there at the Great Falls of the Passaic River. They're building a new visitors center, and Albert H. Small commissioned this painting of the falls.
The other question that we have is, can you tell us more about the Tiffany glass in that one picture?
Oh, yes, the screen. Well, the screen is a sort of holy grail of lost antiques, like the Ark of the Covenant. Perhaps not as serious, but if anyone found it, this would be a great day for the Antiques Roadshow. But it appears that that it is no more. I had read that when it was taken out by in the Roosevelt administration, the 19th century was despised by 1902. That it went to a hotel down on the Chesapeake Bay, and the hotel burnt down, and the screen was completely lost. Not even a piece of it survives. There's only two vestigial photographs or images of it, and both taken from the other side, so to speak. But the glass was extremely thick and extremely heavy. When I was working, there's no color images, though there were a lot of press releases at the time it was put in with very detailed descriptions of the screen and the colors. And that was the basis of the painting, was the written descriptions. And the painting is enormous. But it's surprising that none of it survived, because going around looking at other Tiffany stained glass windows from the same period, there's a beauty at Bar Harbor in Maine. The glass is immensely thick and heavy. Even in a fire, you'd think something would have survived, but so far, apparently not.
Thank you. Our next question is, have you met any First Ladies?
I have been extremely lucky. I have met 5 First Ladies, and they have all been extraordinary women. Charming, educated, amusing, but with some other quality that comes with being the First Lady, and being the sort of woman who could withstand the things that happen to you on the path to becoming First Ladies.
Do you have a favorite First Lady that you met?
Oh no, they're all extraordinary. I would say that Mrs. Laura Bush chose one of my paintings for the private quarters at the Bush Library in Texas. So perhaps she has a special place in my heart, but the fact that I had met them at all seems to me extraordinary.
Thank you. Our next question is, do you have any plans to paint Mrs. Trump?
I would love to paint Mrs. Trump. And it really hasn't been, I understand that she did make changes in the White House, but I have not read in detail what they were. I think when that's written about, that would make that more possible. But she is extraordinarily beautiful, I have to say that.
Okay.
Much more beautiful in person than in photos, and she looks fantastic in photos.
Great. And our last question today is, can you tell us how you got interested in US history as somebody from New Zealand?
Yes. My father had, I don't know, he needed cheering up. And he was mad on the Civil War, the American Civil War, which is very unusual in New Zealand. We did not learn American history. We didn't even learn New Zealand history. We learned English history. But he needed cheering up, and I brought him here to so we could look at battlefields of the Civil War, something he always wanted to do. And we did that for a while, and then we came into Washington, and I was so taken with it, and the feeling that everywhere you are in Washington, you're in the midst of history. Dad had done a lot of reading before we went, and history was all around us. And we were at the National Gallery of Art, and there were easels there. And I discovered that if you were an artist, you could get permission to copy works. That was one of the first things I did when I came here, and that taught me an enormous amount about painting. I was just being in the midst of history, and I guess that because of my interest in architecture, I was able to paint it, and people were interested, very educated people in Washington, and a lot of interest in history here.
Perfect. Thank you, Peter. Well, that looks like all our questions for tonight. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It was a wonderful, great turnout. And thank you, Peter. I hope we can visit your studio again. And Tudor Place, we are very excited to be open on March 4th. So come and see us. Thank you, Peter.
Cool. Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, everybody, for attending. I much appreciate it.
Have a great night, everybody.